Hello, friends. So, most of you know who I am. My name is Sam. This will be the first video that I'm putting on YouTube, and it's part of a transition I'm making from my old business, Ambling Phoenix, to the new one called Witch of the Woods. Now, some of you may have noticed that I am not in the woods, and you would be right. However, part of that name change has to do with some other life changes that I have going on right now that I'm not going to get into just yet, but suffice it to say that if you go on my Patreon and read the About Me, it is really not far from the truth. So I will leave you to that just because I don't want to make this video too long. So that's just kind of like a really brief intro, like why I'm doing this, why I'm putting it up right now. The idea behind it is, you know, I know a bunch of witchy people and I know everyone's at different stages in their journey and stuff, and I just like talking magical shop with people, whoever, at whatever stage. I mean, there's always something to learn. There's always something to share that someone else knows, regardless of how much you think you know or how much you think you don't know. Because, you know, you don't know where anyone else is in their path. I don't know where anyone else is in their path. I love hearing people's stories, you know. By all means, please, I would love to hear your story and where you are on your path and your magical journey or your spiritual path and all that stuff. Just because I like hearing people's stories. But yeah, so I'm gonna hop on here occasionally and just kind of shoot the shit, shoot the magical witchy shit. And, you know, if you want to join in, by all means, please do. But yeah, so today, the one thing I wanted to talk about was something that happened to me recently, which had to do with the tarot deck that I used. And, oh, excuse me. But it had to do with the tarot deck that I used. So, some of you might be familiar with the normal, typical tarot deck called the Rider-Waite deck. Maybe normal's probably not the right word, just the most common is the Rider-Waite deck. And so there's some different versions of it, but it's really like a different artist's interpretation of the illustrations, but they're all the same cards and they all have the same meanings and stuff like that. And it's generally what a lot of readers practice on and learn on, because they have a lot of very kind of important archetypes in them and common themes and symbolism and stuff. And it's kind of like once you understand those is when you branch out into other decks that kind of do their own spin on it. And by no means do you have to start that way. It's just kind of how a lot of people start. It actually isn't how I started. I tried starting with another deck and it took me a lot longer to learn because I had no idea at the time. This deck was so off the beaten path and so wildly differently interpreted that it took me a little longer. So again, everyone has their own journey, and that's totally fine. But anyway, so I've used this deck for probably about 2 years now, even though I did eventually learn it, you know, whatever, 8 years ago or so, when I was learning after that initial deck. But the one that I started using when I started reading for other people was this fairy tale deck. And it was just beautifully illustrated, gorgeous imagery, very whimsical, very, you know, colorful and vibrant. And you know, me personally, I like folklore, I like fairy tales, you know, I'm a sucker for a good Disney movie, that kind of thing. And, you know, just that sort of like a sort of, it's a simplified hero's journey, kind of all encapsulated in one children's tale, which I think is really great, and an easy way to convey some really broad meanings that exist for everyone. But anyway, so I used that deck for a while, and after a little while, I came to have gifted to me another Rider-Waite deck, and I was kind of at the point where I was like, oh, I kind of want to dive back into it and just see if I could deepen the meaning of the cards for me, or deepen my understanding rather of the cards for me. And excuse me. So I did that, and I did that practicing every day with them, and I would pull one card every day asking, like, what am I supposed to learn, or what am I, what's the day gonna be like, that kind of thing. And it was just to try to deepen my understanding. And I always thought, like, okay, well, when I read for people again, I'll just go right back to my fairy tale deck. And the thing is that it didn't feel right. And that's the thing about all this stuff, like, you just have to resonate with it. You have to feel everything out, because all of, the wisdom of the world and the powers that be and whatever else you may have at your disposal, if it's, ancestors or spirit guides or familiars or whatever the fuck you got, everything is trying to give you a message, and it's up to you to interpret it. So, for me, it felt just really weird to think of having to go back to this deck, which I thought was weird in and of itself because I loved it. So anyway, I decided to go ahead and start using the Rider-Waite deck to read with, and that's what I've done for probably about 2.5 years, and I've had great success with it. I've really had some awesome readings, a lot of awesome readings with people, that were deeply resonant, and that I've been told were helpful, and stuff that makes people make the face going, oh my god, how do you know that? And and we all have a good cackle over it. It's really awesome. So so I've used that for a while, and then what I started finding maybe like a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, is that it's like it stopped talking to me. And I haven't really had that before, because previously it was just kind of like, it wasn't that the deck wasn't talking to me, it was just like, I just don't feel like I should use it. And so I didn't. But now it was like, now let me back up a second and say that when I've pulled cards with this deck before, it has a sense of humor, and it is fucking sarcastic, it's sassy, and it tends to do things like, if you ask the classic thing this deck does with me is, if I ask a question too many times over a short time frame, like a few days or a few weeks, I will pull the same card, and it's always that feeling of like those outside forces going, I fucking told you the first time. I'm like, all right, fine, sorry. But yeah, so very sassy, albeit informative, obviously, and it just started giving me really weird information that I knew was absolutely not true, or stuff that was so unlikely to be true. So I started, I cleansed the deck, I charged the deck, I smudged it, I sang to it, I reset it, which some of you may have heard, like you can put the cards back in order, and it's like, did you turn it off and back on again? That's what you do with the deck. So I did that. And I tried it out again, and it didn't work. And I had a friend of mine pull cards on something real quick just to kind of see if it lined up with what I was getting, and she got the exact opposite. I'm like, well, that's everything I need to know because I trust her. And so I start kind of as I was working on all this and seeing that kind of no matter what I was doing, it wasn't working. I had started getting the urge to take the fairy tale deck back out. So, you know, it's one of those things, it's like kind of at the back of your mind, especially like, you know, with everything else one would normally have going on, let alone everything in the world going on. So I kind of just kept forgetting about it. So after this conversation I'd had with my friend, I went ahead and I took it back out. I cleaned it, I smudged it, all that jazz, reset it. And what I realized was, like, when I opened the box up, it was so funny how it felt like immediately like seeing an old friend that you haven't seen in years. And I was shocked that that was how I felt when I opened the box. And it was like really heartwarming, at least for me, you know. And I mean, I was the only one who was there, I guess, but you know, it was nice for me. But yeah, so I did all that and like asked a few questions, did a brief reading, and I'm like, yes, awesome. This lines up. This feels good. This is what has been trying to get my attention in this sort of way that has, you know, nothing comes out and says it unless like you're clairvoyant or something, or not clairvoyant, clairaudient. And I'm not. But for something to say like, hey, it's time to change this. So yeah, so I changed the deck, and things have been pretty, you know, as far as my reading, pretty normal since then. So I would, you know, encourage anyone who is, who kind of questions these nudges and urges, and who might feel like they're not following certain rules or something, you know, by switching stuff, you know, it's just a bunch of nonsense. You know, you do what you gotta do when you gotta do it. And, you know, it comes to everyone in time. So this was just a really interesting experience that I had, and I imagine some other people have had. You know, if you have, by all means, please leave me a note in the comments, and I would love to hear about it. Or again, I would love to just hear about where you are on your journey. And yeah, until next time, we'll leave it at that. But y'all have a good one. See you soon.